So we just saw Lando Norris get a 5-second penalty for forcing another driver off track in this weekend's Austrian Grand Prix. But to me, it seemed completely unfair. And it seems that Lando agreed, as when talking to his race engineer on the radio, he stated what did he expect when referring to how Perez went around the outside of turn 4 before going off the track. However, racing incidents are notoriously difficult to understand who is at fault because there's lots of things happening on track and there's lots of things to consider before you make a decision of the incident between Norris and Perez. So first of all, let's take a look at turn 4. You'll know that we have the DRS zones and the long straights going into turns 1, up the hill, into turn 3, and then down into turn 4. But what I want to do is actually take a look at the corner. Now this corner runs downhill. One of the main things that you'll notice here, there's a long straight before turn 4, meaning that cars can get close just in the slipstream or using DRS. But it's the type of corner that lends itself to these types of incidents that we've seen in the past. And it's to do with the length of the corner. On a longer corner, you have more time to come back and cut back if you're on the outside as a driver. In a shorter corner, where you're alongside a car for a longer period and you can stay out there, you don't have quite as much time. And turn 4 sits somewhere in the middle, meaning it's at that perfect point where if you are on the outside, it's a difficult decision to make as to whether you back out and tuck back in the driver who's on the inside, or whether you try and risk it and hang it around the outside, hoping that essentially you'll be in front of that driver when you come to the exit point. The other thing about turn 4 is that we do have a very defined exit on the outside. We don't just have runoff like we see on a lot of circuits, where drivers might be used to hanging it around the outside, and if it doesn't quite work out, then they just go onto the tarmac runoff and come back on the circuit. Whereas here at turn 4 at Austria, we have that gravel trap. Personally, I really like these natural extremities to the racetrack, these gravel traps or grass, because it makes you drive in a different way as a driver. And I do believe that if you run wide, if you get pushed out wide, if you take that decision to take that risk and it doesn't come off, then it should cost you a little bit of time. Now, I don't mean a time penalty from the stewards, I mean running wide onto the gravel and losing a few positions, as we saw Perez do at the beginning of this race. Now, we saw something similar happen to Alex Albon, the Red Bull driver, last year with Lewis Hamilton. However, this incident was slightly different, although Hamilton did still get a time penalty. In the incident last year, Albon was much further alongside Lewis Hamilton. In fact, he was 3/4 of the way past Lewis Hamilton. It was at that point at the apex where Lewis Hamilton made a slight mistake and understeered slightly wide, and his front left tyre made contact with Albon's rear tyre. So it was a slightly different incident. So what exactly happened between Norris and Perez? Well, Perez got a really good exit from the previous corner and then got in the toe of Norris. Norris went to the right-hand side to defend and Perez went around the outside. And we've seen this many, many times going into turn 4 at the Red Bull Ring. They were fairly well matched when they then got on the brakes, and Norris carried the speed into the corner, at which point he was just a few feet in front of Perez. Norris then came out of the corner more or less on his natural line, probably actually leaving a little bit more space on the outside for Perez. The important distinction to make here is that Norris was in front of Perez, and from my perspective as a driver, when you are even slightly ahead of the driver on the outside, you own the racing line. It's your call as to whether you move the car out on your natural line or not. However, in my opinion, this changes when the driver on the outside is in front of you. So as we saw with Hamilton and Albon last year, where Albon was around the outside, but he was in front, and actually by quite a margin, he then owns that corner, and it's up to Hamilton to reduce his speed to keep his car on a slightly tighter line. We actually saw a similar thing when Norris caught Hamilton on lap 54. And Norris was in a position where he could have risked it around the outside. However, he slowed the car down a little bit more than he needed to, tucked the car inside Hamilton, meaning that he could get on the accelerator sooner, also meaning that as he tucks the car inside Hamilton, the air comes back over the front wing of his McLaren, meaning that he could get rid of some of that understeer and get on the accelerator. He then got a better exit coming out of turn 4 than Hamilton, and then went on to overtake him going into turn 5. We need to thank our sponsor, Fuel for Fans. As I'm sure you know, Racing Point changed to Aston Martin this year, bringing British Racing Green back to the grid, but also bringing us a line of new merch, which is all available from Fuel for Fans. Whether you're supporting Max or Lewis in the title fight this year, there are caps, t-shirts, jackets and masks that you can choose from, and they are the one-stop shop for any F1 clothing. You can check them out with the link in the description below, but make sure to use code DRIVER61 for 20% off at checkout. As we know, Norris then went on to get a 5-second penalty, and I really see this as a racing incident. We actually put a poll on the Driver61 channel, and it seems that you guys also agree. And I hope this isn't something that we see going forward from the FIA. We want to be able to see the drivers fight hard on track. We want to see them millimeters apart when they're coming out of corners. And it's my opinion that if you are on the outside and you are behind the car that you're trying to overtake, you should expect them to run you out of the road. All of the F1 drivers have been racing since they were 5 or 6 years old, through karts and through single-seaters. And this is something that we see through all of the ranks, because basically if you're ahead and you're on the inside of the track, the person on the outside of you who is overtaking is going to come off worse. So if you just run them a little bit wide, then so be it. You get pushed on the outside, and it's always been that way. And I really think that this is the fairest way, and it's also better for the spectators watching the sport. One of the most interesting aspects of this was when Norris spoke to his race engineer asking what Perez expected from being on the outside. And I think that just goes to show what is typically expected from racing drivers. I think what a lot of the drivers and teams are looking for is consistency. We actually saw Max run Charles wide last year at turn 3, which didn't result in any kind of penalty, where you could actually see Max just open up the steering wheel and move Leclerc onto the outside of the track. Yes, we do want consistency with the rules. However, I will say, even on top of consistency, we still do want to see hard wheel-to-wheel action when drivers are racing on track. I'm really keen to hear what you guys think about this incident, so let us know in the comments below. Cheers, and I'll see you in the next video.